Jonas just sold the company. I said it right as everyone was reaching for the last dish on the Christmas Eve table. The clinking of silverware stopped like someone hit a switch. No one laughed. No one picked up whatever story they were bragging about. Just the warm lights reflecting off faces that were suddenly changing color. Scott, my husband's brother, looked at me first. It was the kind of look you give when you think you must have heard something wrong. The piece of cake in his hand froze in midair. Victoria, my mother-in-law, set her glass down so lightly it didn't make a sound, but her hand tightened around it. Everyone stayed quiet. I sat there with my back straight, hands on my lap, just watching. No shaking, no explaining. Victoria broke the silence. "Are you exaggerating to get attention, Camille?" Her voice tilted with doubt, like I'd mixed real life with some fairy tale. The whole table waited for my reaction, but I didn't say anything else. I just looked at her, calm enough that she had to look away first. I knew that moment was the breaking point of years piled up, but to understand it, I have to go back a few years before I became a daughter-in-law in that house. When I first met Jonas, he was a quiet, gentle software engineer, smart, in a way most people overlooked. I was a project manager at a tech company. I didn't like noise, didn't like showing off, and most of the time I just wanted to do my work. We fit because our quiet never felt forced. When Jonas brought me home to meet his family, I remember standing in front of their big wooden door and knowing right away the atmosphere inside would be different. No one said anything yet. It was the looks, those first few seconds that told me exactly where I stood in that house. Victoria, Jonas's mom, is the kind of person who likes to control everything, from the table setting to the future of every person in the family. She judges people by money more than anything else, and she doesn't hide it. Scott, Jonas's brother, is the opposite. Loud, full of stories about his achievements, always acting like he knows more about the world than anyone in the room. I still remember clearly the first time I stepped into their living room. Victoria looked me up and down, quick but long enough for me to see the calculation in her eyes. Then she turned to Jonas and smiled like she was giving an objective comment. Our family is used to a high standard. She didn't say I didn't fit. She didn't have to. The message hung in the air, cold and sharp like a thin blade. Jonas gently held my hand then. He thought it would make me feel better. It didn't. It only made me see even more clearly the gap his family was trying to place between us. I didn't respond to Victoria. I didn't explain what I did, how much I earned, or how I lived. I stayed quiet. But I remembered everything. Scott started talking after that, about his job, his deals, the people he knew, the big decisions he claimed no one else would dare make. Long stories with too many details, all for one reason, to show me how successful he was and how Jonas didn't measure up to him. I realized that in this house, Jonas was always put second, not because he wasn't good enough, but because they didn't want to see his real worth. A family that prides itself on achievements and showing off will always underestimate someone quiet, and I understood that from the very first visit. That night, I just sat next to Jonas, listening to every comment and every laugh that tilted towards Scott. The sideways glances, the tight smiles from Victoria whenever Jonas said something that didn't match her idea of acceptable. I didn't blame them. I just took note. When we left their house that day, I knew this wasn't a family that would easily accept me. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I wasn't the kind of person they thought Jonas deserved. And the way they judged me through their own standards didn't hurt me. It just made me more alert. I didn't know then that the years ahead would carry even more small cuts. But on this Christmas Eve, I saw all of it reflected on their faces when I said the first sentence. Jonas just sold the company. They didn't understand what had changed, but I did, and that was the beginning. After that first Christmas, I started seeing everything in that house more clearly, not because they changed, but because I stopped convincing myself that what I'd seen was just a first impression. When Jonas and I got married, everything became even more obvious. Jonas's family compared him to Scott almost every time everyone was together. No hiding it, no softening it. The comparisons came out like an old habit. Scott was more decisive. Scott understood the market better. Scott had a business mind. And Jonas was too gentle to do anything big. Every time, Jonas just gave a small smile. No arguing, no proving anything. He'd grown used to being put second, so he didn't see it as worth reacting to. But I saw the small cuts it left on him. Victoria often added a comment aimed at me, wrapped in a tone that sounded harmless. He's not as ambitious as Scott, probably because living with Camille makes him too soft. She said it lightly, without a second thought. Natural, casual, but clear enough that everyone knew what she meant. I saw Scott's eyes flash in agreement. I also saw Jonas sit still, his hands laced together under the table. I didn't say anything. I just looked at Victoria, then lowered my eyes and kept eating. Quiet, but not weak. The small injustices started showing up like clockwork. At family dinners, I was always handed the tasks no one wanted, clearing the table, pouring water, rearranging things that had nothing to do with me. Everything was done gently, as if they believed it was my natural role. No one asked if I wanted to. They just assigned it, and waited for me to get up. A few times, Jonas tried to help, but Victoria stopped him with one simple line. "Let Camille do it. She's used to it." Her voice made it sound like I'd been serving their family for years. I set my bowl down, not fast, not hard, just enough for a soft clink. Then I stood up and did what they handed me. I wasn't angry. I just noted it. Scott never missed a chance to show he was above Jonas. Whenever Jonas started sharing something about his work at the table, Scott cut in right away. "That's not how it works. Let me explain." He said it like Jonas was a child trying to talk about something beyond his understanding. Every time, Jonas pressed his lips together and swallowed it all. He didn't argue or correct anything. He just let Scott keep talking. I'd seen it happen so many times I stopped counting. But there was one moment I remember clearly. Jonas had barely started talking about a feature he was building when Scott jumped in with a tone that was half pity, half mockery. "You don't understand business, Jonas. You should listen to someone with experience." He looked around the table as if waiting for applause. And of course, Victoria nodded. Jonas went quiet. I looked at him. His eyes lowered just a little. That moment felt like a small knife sharpened straight. Victoria didn't just look down on Jonas. She used Jonas to take shots at me. If Jonas listened, he'd be doing better. She said it right in front of me, right in the middle of dinner, like she was announcing an undeniable fact. Her meaning was clear. If Jonas wasn't successful, it was my fault. I stayed still, eyes on the table, not because I was avoiding anything. I was just keeping my voice from slipping out of the calm I needed. The cut didn't hurt in a soft way. It just made me colder. There was one time I responded, but only with a short line. "I don't think it's fair that everything keeps being blamed on Jonas." I said it quietly, not confrontational. But Victoria answered right away with a half smile in her voice. "You're too sensitive, Camille. I'm just stating facts." She used that line like a card she could play to erase anything I felt. Another time, when I pulled my hand back after one of Scott's snide comments, he said the same thing. "You're overreacting. We're just joking." No one in that house joked like that. But they wanted me to believe it. Gaslighting doesn't need yelling. It only needs the same dismissive sentences repeated long enough to make you question yourself. But I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what they were doing. I just didn't say it out loud. Jonas didn't escape it either. Whenever he tried to push back against an unfair comment, Victoria would say, "Don't make a big deal out of it. I'm only trying to help you." That line made Jonas step back immediately. He was used to letting things slide to avoid conflict. I understood. Jonas is kind, but that kindness made them believe they had the right to decide everything in his life. The closer I got to his family, the more I saw a pattern. They treated Jonas like someone not mature enough to choose his own life. And when I came into the picture, they treated me like the person dragging him down. Every word they said was aimed at making me believe I was part of the problem, even when I hadn't done anything. At first, I thought I could fit in if I was patient enough. But the more I listened, the more I watched, the clearer the truth became. So clear I couldn't ignore it. They didn't just look down on me. They looked down on Jonas, too. That disrespect didn't explode. It seeped in day after day, like water dripping on stone quiet, but leaving a mark. I'm not someone who gets emotional easily, but there were moments, watching Jonas swallow all his discomfort, when I felt a sharp pinch in my chest. Not pity, awareness. I started to understand why he stayed quiet, why he let them decide for him. He lived in his family's shadow for too long. And that was when a small crack formed in me, not a crack from being hurt, a crack between I want to belong to this family and I don't need their approval. That crack was cold, clear, and impossible to mend in the way they wanted. People often say in-laws are only difficult in the beginning. But for me, the hard part wasn't their unpleasant behavior. It was the disrespect wrapped in their polite manners. It was subtle, steady, and enough to create a distance I no longer wanted to cross. I stayed quiet. I didn't fight every comment they made, but I saw everything. I remembered everything. And I started preparing for that distance to grow between us. I didn't know when it would reach its breaking point, but I could feel it coming. The gap between me and Jonas's family grew with every time they dismissed him. But in that very gap, something new appeared, something they didn't know about and could never control. One evening, the two of us were sitting on the sofa when Jonas suddenly let out a long breath and leaned back. The lamp cast a soft light across his face, tired, but bright in a different way. I want to build something of my own, he said. No preface, no searching for the right words, just a simple sentence, heavy in all the ways I could hear. I closed my laptop screen and turned to him. What do you mean? He wants to create a product, just a small platform. But he believes it has a path, Jonas said. His voice wasn't loud or soft, just steady. I haven't told anyone. You're the first. I didn't ask why he chose me. I just nodded. I knew how important this was to him in a way no one in his family ever bothered to see. From that day, I started helping him quietly. When Jonas wrote his first pitch, I read every line, cut the rambling parts, and suggested clearer phrasing. He drew the timeline. I adjusted it so it was realistic and easy to follow. When he struggled with the slide deck, I helped him rearrange the layout so people would understand the point right away. No one in his family knew, and I didn't plan to tell them. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew they'd crush Jonas's drive with one sarcastic comment. I'd seen them do it too many times. At a family gathering, when Jonas had just finished testing his first demo, the usual jab showed up again. Victoria sat at the head of the table, slowly turning her wine glass, then spoke with a tone like she was offering precious advice. Jonas, start a company, be realistic. Every eye turned to him. Scott smirked, waiting for his turn. I looked at Jonas. He gave a small, polite smile, like the comment didn't touch him, but I saw the hand under the table tighten, and Scott didn't skip his chance. Who would invest in an idea like that? You need to look at the market. And honestly, you're better suited to being an employee. The whole table let out a small laugh. I didn't. I looked at each person, one by one, like I was marking something down. Just that small action made Scott glance away. They thought Jonas would always be the lowest in the family. and they were sure his idea was nothing more than a joke. I didn't need to prove them wrong. I just needed to keep the record straight. Jonas kept working, but the road wasn't easy. He lost the first potential deal after only 2 calls. The next investor replied with a short email, "Not a fit." Jonas was rejected a 3rd time in a week. Each time he only said, "It's okay, I'll redo it." But I saw the small shadows forming in his eyes. His family didn't miss the chance to use those failures as proof. Once, after hearing Jonas got turned down, Victoria said right in front of me, "See, I told you, Jonas isn't the type who can do anything big." She said it as gently as if she were explaining something obvious. Scott added, "I've told you, you need to know what you're suited for." I looked at Jonas. He didn't react. He just sat there, shoulders dipping a little, like he was trying to shrink away from their comments. I knew he was wondering whether they might be right. But I knew one thing clearly. They had never seen who Jonas really was, even when the truth was right in front of them. In the nights that followed, Jonas kept working. I sat beside him without saying much. I didn't praise him or give shallow encouragement. I was just there so he knew he wasn't alone. When he revised his pitch for the 8th time, I opened the older version and compared each section. When he hesitated between 2 options, I asked short questions so he could see the answer himself. All of it was quiet. Then one afternoon, while I was making a drink in the kitchen, Jonas called me. His voice was soft but shaking in a way he couldn't hide. "Camille, can you come here for a second?" I walked over and saw him staring at an email on his screen. Just one subject line. Acquisition proposal. He clicked it. A major company was offering to buy his startup. The number in that email was enough to silence anyone in his family on the spot. Jonas rested his hand on the keyboard. It was trembling slightly, not from fear, from not quite believing it was actually happening. I stood beside him, calmly reading each line. I didn't say a word. I just put my hand on his shoulder, a small gesture but enough for him to take a deeper breath. "We did it," Jonas whispered. His voice tightened a little, but it didn't break. It was just emotion held together. We looked at each other. Nothing else needed to be said. We both knew what this meant. And the first thing we decided, keep it quiet. Don't tell his family. Don't say a word until we chose how to stand in front of them. Because I understood one simple truth. Their silence later would be worth more than anything we could brag about now. Jonas nodded. I nodded back. An agreement that didn't need many words. In that moment, I realized something. Jonas's journey wasn't about proving to his family how capable he was. It was about him seeing it for himself. And I was the only one standing beside him when it finally happened. We closed the laptop. The room went quiet, but not the kind of quiet in Victoria's house, heavy and full of judgment. This was the quiet of 2 people who had just crossed a line no one thought they could reach, and I knew everything was about to change. That Christmas Eve, Victoria's house was decorated beautifully, but around the dinner table, the same familiar sound filled the air. Scott talking about the huge deals he'd just closed, adding a few hints about how people who don't understand business wouldn't get it. Victoria listened with a proud expression, as if Scott's success were her personal achievement. I sat at the corner of the table, hand on my glass, quiet. I didn't jump in. I didn't need to. I just watched. The quieter I was, the clearer everything in that house became, like a bright white light shining straight onto the table. Jonas kept giving polite smiles whenever he was dragged into comparisons, but I saw the tendon in his wrist tighten every time Scott bragged for the 3rd time about his market instincts. Victoria chose the exact moment Jonas set his knife down to drop her final jab. Jonas should learn how to succeed from Scott, holding on to those little kid projects. It won't go anywhere. She said it softly, almost like a whisper, but loud enough for everyone to hear. A soft ripple of laughter went around the table. Scott looked at me, waiting for a reaction. eyes full of the confidence of someone who thinks he's above everyone else. I set my glass down, not hard, but enough for the sound of it to make a few heads turn. I lifted my chin and looked straight at Victoria. Her expression paused for a split second. I kept my voice calm, steady, and cold. Jonas just sold the company. That sentence hit the dinner table like a stone dropped into a still lake. No ripples. It just sank. Every other sound disappeared. Scott, who'd been leaning back in his chair mid-story, froze, his mouth slightly open, but nothing coming out. Victoria's eyes widened just a little. For the first time in years, she didn't have time to twist her own words into another insult. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't change my expression. I didn't try to prove anything. I just said the truth. A truth they never imagined because they'd spent so long looking down that they forgot to look forward. The room stayed silent. The only sound was the soft rustle of wrapping paper somewhere in the living room. Jonas looked at me, stunned for a second. He hadn't expected me to say it right then, but his eyes warmed in a way only I could read. I looked at each person. Then I added one sentence, just one. Cold, sharp, but not meant to humiliate. Just enough to open the space between what they believed about Jonas and the truth they'd avoided for years. There are things you don't see, simply because you never look. That line made Scott sit upright. Victoria clenched her napkin so tightly the folds pressed into her hand. I didn't need to list the acquisition amount, didn't need to name the company behind it, didn't need to provide proof. Their silence was the proof, and my calm told them I wasn't bluffing. Scott finally managed to speak. What did you say he sold? His voice caught, stuck somewhere in his throat. All the confidence he'd paraded around all evening was gone. The company Jonas built himself, I answered. Short, simple, enough. The one you all called a little kid project. Victoria looked at Jonas. The question was written clearly in her eyes. Is it true? Jonas just gave a small nod. No explanation. No bragging. His eyes didn't drop the way they always did whenever he was compared to Scott. They were steady, so steady the whole room seemed to hold its breath. No one said another word. No one dared to. The air in the room changed completely, like they just heard a truth they were never prepared to face. A truth that didn't slam into them. It simply stood there, clear as the light hanging over the table, impossible to look away from. I stayed seated. I didn't stand. I wanted them to sit with this moment, the moment when all the years of judgment, sarcasm, and comparison collapsed with a one sentence. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just watched them, as calm as I'd been when I walked in. Victoria blinked rapidly, as if searching for something to say, but nothing came. Scott looked at his mother, then at Jonas again. He wasn't used to seeing his younger brother in a position like this. The truth made him uncomfortable in a way no joke could cover. I could feel the shift in the room, like everyone had been moved to a different place without warning. No one needed to admit anything. The silence did it for them. I didn't add another word. I didn't explain how hard Jonas had worked. I didn't bring up the sleepless nights, the rejections, or the afternoon he opened that acquisition email. Those things belonged to Jonas, not to them. I let the truth hang in the room, heavy, clear, and enough to make the people who had looked down on him for years face themselves. No one in that house was prepared for this moment. But I had been ready for a long time. So I sat there, calm, letting them feel the weight of what they never imagined would happen. After I spoke, the room fell into a state I can only call awake. No one knew where to rest their eyes. No one dared say another word about Jonas. All the little insults they tossed out so easily vanished without a trace. I looked around the table. Scott's eyes kept darting away. like meeting mine would force him to confront something he didn't want to admit. Victoria sat stiff, her lips pressed tight. The confidence she always wrapped around her words wasn't holding up anymore. What I saw was simple. Jonas's position had shifted, not because of anything he said, but because the truth was no longer theirs to twist. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't want them to fear me. I just wanted them quiet long enough to hear, really hear, how they treated Jonas all these years. And this moment was exactly that silence. I took a breath and stood up. Not suddenly, not to make a scene, just stood, calm and steady. Jonas looked at me, as if waiting for a signal. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My calm was the final blow, the kind no one can fight back against, because it isn't aimed at them. It simply says something about who I am. Victoria was the first to try pulling herself out of the moment. Why didn't you two say anything earlier? Her voice sounded different, softer, less sharp, as if she was reaching for any reason to believe she hadn't been wrong. I turned and looked at her, a small smile, light, polite, but enough for her to know I understood everything. There was no need to say anything, I replied, my voice low and steady, not bitter. Some things only need to be known by the right people. Victoria lowered her eyes. She didn't defend herself. She didn't try to twist anything. She knew better than anyone that the words she'd used to belittle Jonas had become hollow echoes in this quiet room. I took Jonas's hand. His hand was warm and a little shaky, but not from fear. It was because, for the first time in his life, the truth stood with him and didn't need anyone's permission to do so. We walked away from the dinner table. Each step was light. Each step felt like brushing off a layer of old dust that had clung to us for too long. No one called after us. No one dared. They just watched this time, not looking down, not looking past us, but looking straight in a way they should have done years ago. At the door, I paused for one beat. I didn't turn back. I didn't want to end this moment with a sense of victory. I wanted to end it with clarity. The door closed behind us with a small, clean sound. No echo, no drag. Just enough to cut the last thread tying us to that house. The wind outside was colder than the room we'd left, but I felt lighter. Like I'd just walked out of a conversation I'd been preparing for over many years, even though I never said the words out loud. Jonas tightened his grip on my hand. You okay? I nodded. I'm okay. Nothing more, nothing less, real enough to make him smile a little. As we stepped down the stone stairs, I realized something I'd never said, not even to myself. Jonas's family never had the right to judge me. They only thought they did. And I let them think that for far too long. My victory wasn't in the way they went silent when I spoke. It wasn't in the confusion on their faces or the shift in Jonas's place at the table. My victory was simpler. I chose myself. I chose to stand without shouting. I chose to walk away without carrying any explanation. And in the end, I chose to believe in Jonas's worth more than anything his family ever said about him. The car unlocked with a soft beep. Jonas got in first, then held the door for me. When I sat down, I glanced out the window and saw the house light spilling over the trees. We drove off without looking back. We didn't need to. Some things are meant to stay behind. I placed my hand over Jonas's. You okay? He nodded. I've never felt seen like that before. I smiled. I didn't say that I'd seen him from the very first day. I didn't have to. Jonas knew. The car pulled away from the narrow road in front of the house. The wind slipped past the windows with a soft sound, enough to tell me I was truly stepping into a new part of my life. Our story didn't need the approval of anyone sitting in that house. And this Christmas, for the first time, I felt like I no longer had to carry their judgment. I'd taken it off myself. What I left behind in that house wasn't revenge. It was the truth. And truth is sharp enough to make people look at themselves. As for me, I just walked away. Sometimes you have to leave a place that no longer deserves you. Not to prove anything, but to remind yourself that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you keep for yourself. This is where the story ends. Thank you for listening to this whole journey. Have you ever had to stand up for your own worth? Share it in the comments, and please support us by subscribing to the channel. We truly appreciate your support.